My name is Lauren Mitchell, and I'm 33 years old. If you'd told me a year ago that I'd be sitting here telling this story, I would have laughed, because some betrayals seem too absurd to ever be real. But life has a way of proving you wrong in the most spectacular, humiliating fashion. My sister Amber is 2 years younger than me. From the moment she arrived in our family, she claimed every spotlight I ever tried to stand in. When we were kids, she had this golden halo about her, big green eyes and a dimpled smile that made adults melt. I was the quieter child, the one who read books under the covers while Amber performed songs in the living room. My parents would beam at her as though she'd hung the stars herself. I used to think I was imagining it, the favoritism, the constant excuses for Amber's behavior. But memory doesn't lie. I remember the Christmas I was 6. I got a plush white rabbit I'd been begging for all year. I named her Violet. By New Year's Day, Amber had claimed Violet as hers, and my parents just shrugged. "She's little," Mom would say. "Be patient with your sister." That same refrain followed me through childhood. When Amber ripped my homework, wore my clothes, or told my secrets to anyone who'd listen, "Be patient. Be kind. She doesn't mean any harm." But she did, and I knew it. Amber's entire life was a series of competitions only she knew we were having. In high school, it only got worse. She'd borrow my sweaters without asking, flirt with the boy I had a crush on, or, accidentally, schedule her own celebrations during my milestones. When I was nominated for an academic scholarship, Amber insisted on throwing a big party the same weekend to show off her new boyfriend. My achievements became background noise to her chaos. By the time I graduated, I was desperate to breathe air that didn't smell like rivalry, so I applied to universities as far away as I dared. When I got into a master's program in Seattle, I packed my bags without a second thought. My parents were baffled. "Why so far?" they asked. I didn't answer because the real reason would only sound petty. I was tired of disappearing. Seattle was my salvation. Those years felt like a second childhood, one where I could finally exist without comparison. I studied marketing and communications, made friends who valued my quiet determination, and slowly learned who I was without Amber. I was 24 when I met Nathan. Nathan Scott was the kind of man who made you feel like you were the only person in the room. He had a soft voice, warm brown eyes, and a gentle way of listening that made me feel seen. We met in a late-night study group. He accidentally spilled coffee on my notes and insisted on taking me to dinner to make it up to me. That dinner turned into another, then another. Before long, we were inseparable. For the first time, I believed I'd finally outrun my sister's shadow, that I'd built something Amber couldn't touch. But of course, life had other plans. We moved back to Austin after graduation to be closer to family. Nathan found a promising job in a tech firm, and I started climbing the ladder in marketing. At first, it was everything I'd dreamed of. A charming little house in Hyde Park. Dinner on the porch. Plans for the future. I believed we were solid, unbreakable. Looking back, I can see how naive I was. Amber re-entered my life with all the subtlety of a wrecking ball. She'd moved to Austin for her pharmaceutical sales job. It didn't take long before the old patterns returned. She'd pop over unannounced, borrow clothes she never returned, and make snide remarks about how settled I'd become. She didn't mean it as a compliment. When Nathan proposed to me on a weekend trip to Big Bend, I was overwhelmed with joy. I called my parents right away. Mom cried. Dad congratulated me. When I told Amber, there was a pause on the line before she said, "Well, I suppose I'm happy for you," as though she was doing me a favor. I should have paid attention to that moment. It was a preview of what was to come. But I didn't. I was too busy being in love, too desperate to believe I could finally have something all my own. Our wedding was beautiful. Small, intimate, and everything I'd ever hoped for, except for Amber's behavior. She arrived late to the rehearsal dinner. She wore an ivory dress to the ceremony. She gave a toast that started with, "I'm not sure why Lauren always gets everything first," and ended in tears that made her the center of attention. Still, I forgave her, because that's what I'd always done. In the first 2 years of our marriage, I thought maybe things had shifted. Nathan and I built a life together. We traveled, we saved, we dreamed. Amber dated a string of men, none of whom stuck around for long. Every time a relationship ended, she'd come crying to me. And I'd comfort her because that's what sisters are supposed to do. But some patterns don't die easily. Sometimes they just lie dormant, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And that's exactly what happened the night of my 33rd birthday dinner. If I could pinpoint the precise moment when I felt something shift in my marriage, it wasn't a huge betrayal or some unmistakable sign. It was subtler than that, like a hairline crack in glass that starts small, almost invisible, but slowly spreads until the whole pane shatters. It began the year Nathan got his big promotion. He was suddenly traveling more, working longer hours. At first, I told myself this was normal. We were both ambitious. We had goals. It was just a phase. But when the phase stretched from weeks into months, I started to worry. He used to come home and sit beside me on the couch, one arm draped around my shoulders while we shared takeout and Netflix. Lately, he walked in tired, distant, sometimes not until after I'd gone to bed. His phone was always in his hand, his eyes fixed on it even when I was talking. He started taking it into the bathroom, something he'd never done before. I asked him once, casually I thought, who he was texting so much. He didn't even look up when he answered, "Just work stuff, babe." But he never left his phone where I could see it, never let it out of his pocket. Sometimes I'd hear it vibrating on the nightstand long after midnight, and he'd grab it before I could even roll over to look. I tried to trust him. I reminded myself that marriage was built on faith, on believing the best when you couldn't prove anything either way. But a pit was growing in my stomach that I couldn't ignore. Amber didn't help. She'd stopped by more often, claiming she was just checking in. She'd make comments that didn't sit right with me. "Nathan's so charming," she'd say, with that little smile that never reached her eyes. "I don't know how you keep him interested in suburban life. You're braver than me." I didn't know what to make of it, so I pushed it aside. I wanted to believe she was just being careless with her words, not malicious. Maybe she was lonely. Maybe she missed me. When my birthday approached, Nathan promised he'd plan something special. "We'll celebrate right," he told me, brushing a kiss across my forehead. "I know I've been distracted. You deserve better." Those words felt like balm. I clung to them because they let me imagine things might return to normal. I spent the week leading up to my birthday telling myself everything was fine, that any cracks I felt were just the ordinary stress of life piling up. My parents decided to host dinner at a restaurant I loved, a cozy spot called Rustica, tucked in the old warehouse district. They'd made reservations weeks in advance. My mom called me the morning of my birthday to go over details for the 10th time. What time would I arrive? Did I want them to bring a cake or let the restaurant handle it? Did I need anything else? I almost laughed. My mother had never been so concerned with the details of my happiness. But maybe, I thought, this was her way of trying. That afternoon, I stood in front of my closet longer than I'd like to admit. I settled on a soft green dress Nathan once said made my eyes look like jade. I did my hair the way he liked it, loose waves around my shoulders. As I applied a final swipe of lipstick, I told myself tonight would be the turning point. Tonight we'd find our way back to each other. Nathan texted that he'd meet me there. "Running late. Big call," he wrote. I tried to swallow the disappointment that rose in my chest. I texted back, "No problem, see you soon," At Ristica, the hostess greeted me by name. "Your party's already here," she said brightly, leading me past rows of tables glowing in the amber light. My parents stood to greet me, Dad awkwardly patting my back, while Mom handed me a small wrapped box. "You look lovely," she said, though her eyes flicked to my hair as if to search for imperfections. "Where's Nathan?" "Still at work," I replied. "He's on his way." My father sighed sympathetically. "Well, that's the price of success." I sat down, forcing myself to smile as we ordered drinks. I kept checking the door, hoping every new arrival was Nathan. 20 minutes passed. My phone stayed silent. My water glass sweated against my palm. And then, finally, I heard laughter. Amber's laughter, bright and unmistakable. I turned and felt my breath catch. There she was, striding through the restaurant as if it were a stage built just for her, wearing a red dress that clung to her like paint. Nathan was with her. They were walking too close. Their shoulders brushed as they navigated between tables. He held the door for her, hand hovering just above the small of her back. A touch so familiar, so intimate, I felt my throat close. Amber saw me watching. Her smile widened and she lifted a hand in greeting. "Sorry we're late," she called across the restaurant as though it were no big deal. "I ran into Nathan in the parking lot." I nodded, my face a mask. My heart hammered so loudly I could barely hear. They reached the table. Amber leaned down to kiss my cheek, leaving no trace of lipstick, just the icy chill of her audacity. Nathan bent to hug me, pressing a fleeting kiss to my temple. "Happy birthday," he murmured, not meeting my eyes. I felt like the floor had dropped out beneath me, but I kept my voice calm. "Thank you both for coming." We sat, and the conversation resumed as if nothing was strange. My parents chatted about their recent trip to Santa Fe. Amber jumped in with a story about a sales conference. Nathan contributed monosyllables, his gaze fixed on his water glass. Under the table, I laid my hand on his knee, searching for some reassurance. He flinched, then placed his hand over mine. His palm was damp. "Everything okay?" I whispered. "Fine," he said too quickly. "Just tired." Our drinks arrived. My parents ordered wine. I stuck to water. I couldn't risk dulling my instincts. Something was wrong, so wrong, and the answers were sitting inches away from me. The waiter took our orders. Amber laughed too loudly at something my father said, her hand brushing Nathan's arm as she leaned across him for the bread basket. He didn't pull away. I felt my vision narrow to a single point. Amber's fingers, resting on my husband's wrist as though it were the most natural thing in the world. And in that moment, some part of me knew. Even before she spoke the words that would end my marriage, I knew. The evidence had been there for months, building up piece by damning piece. But nothing, not the late nights, not the secretive phone calls, not even the evasive answers, had prepared me for the performance Amber was about to deliver. The air in the restaurant felt too warm, too close. My mother was recounting a story about the neighbor's new pool, but I couldn't focus. All I could see was Amber, lounging in her chair across from me, her smile a razor's edge. Nathan stared at the table, refusing to meet my eyes. I kept thinking, maybe this is just my imagination. Maybe I'm reading too much into it. But the conviction in my gut only grew stronger with every glance they shared, every moment of conspiratorial silence between them. When the main courses arrived, Amber delicately cut into her steak, dabbing at her mouth with her napkin as though she were about to host a televised cooking segment. She was almost vibrating with anticipation, her foot tapping under the table. I'd known her my entire life. I recognized that energy. It was the look she got when she was about to announce something she knew would overshadow everything else. My father raised his glass. "Before we eat, a toast to Lauren on her birthday," he began, looking pleased with himself. "Lauren, you've always been our steady, dependable daughter. We're proud of the life you've built." Steady, dependable. Not passionate, not exceptional. Just safe. A placeholder for more exciting stories. I forced a polite smile as everyone clinked glasses. My fingers trembled slightly against the stem of my water glass. I swallowed the last of my composure. Before I could even set my glass down, Amber's chair scraped back. She stood, one manicured hand resting on the table, her green eyes bright and wet. I felt the dread bloom in my chest, as inevitable as the sunrise. "I know this is Lauren's night," she began in that syrupy voice she used whenever she was about to hijack an occasion. "But I have something really important to share. Something that, well, I can't keep it in any longer." She turned her gaze directly on me, and for a moment I saw something triumphant there, like a cat about to drop a dead mouse at its owner's feet. My mother frowned. "Amber, can this wait? It's your sister's—" "No, Mom," she interrupted sweetly. "It can't." She placed a hand over her stomach, her lips curving into a practiced, sentimental smile. "I'm pregnant." For a moment the restaurant was perfectly still. The only sound was the clink of cutlery from another table. My heart thudded painfully against my ribs. I swallowed, trying to find my voice, but she wasn't finished. "And before you all start asking questions," she continued, glancing at Nathan, "I want you to know, Nathan is the father." My mother gasped, a hand flying to her mouth. My father blinked in confusion, his gaze darting between Amber and Nathan. But Nathan, he didn't look shocked. He didn't look outraged. He looked resigned. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. My entire body went cold, as though every drop of blood had drained into the floor. Nathan finally spoke, his voice low. "Lauren, I'm sorry, I never wanted you to find out like this." Find out like this. Like this was some logistical detail I'd simply overlooked. I thought about every late night, every secret phone call, every deflection. They hadn't just betrayed me. They'd planned this moment. My birthday. My favorite restaurant. My family. I stared at Amber, trying to find some trace of the little girl who used to follow me around the backyard. But all I saw was calculation. Her hand rested protectively over her belly, as though she were daring anyone to challenge her. My mother's voice trembled. I don't understand. Nathan is your sister's husband." Amber's lips twitched. "Not for much longer," she said, her tone dismissive. "They've been having problems for months. I didn't plan this, but sometimes you can't fight love." Love, that was what she was calling it. The destruction of my marriage, the theft of the only safe place I'd ever known. My hands felt numb in my lap, but somewhere, beneath the shock and humiliation, a small voice whispered, "You knew. You've known for months." And it was true. I'd seen the signs. I just hadn't wanted to believe it. I took a breath and lifted my chin. "Are you finished?" I asked, my voice startlingly steady. Amber blinked, clearly caught off guard. "What? Are you finished with your announcement?" I clarified. "Because if you are, I'd like to say something." My father cleared his throat. "Maybe this isn't the place." "No, Dad," I said quietly. "It is." I folded my napkin slowly, deliberately, buying myself a few more seconds to gather my thoughts. When I looked back up, I met Nathan's eyes. He looked pale, almost sick, but he didn't look away. "I've known about this for 3 months," I began. Amber's triumphant expression faltered. "You... what?" "I borrowed Nathan's laptop back in March," I continued. "An email popped up. From you." My mother pressed her napkin to her lips. My father sat back in his chair, stunned. Amber opened her mouth, but I held up a hand. "Don't bother denying it," I have the messages, and the photos, and the phone records. Nathan swallowed hard. Lauren, please. No, I interrupted. You don't get to talk. Not yet. I turned to Amber. I always wondered what it would take for you to finally be satisfied, for you to take something from me so completely there'd be nothing left. She looked stricken now, her hand still clutching her stomach like a shield. I thought maybe this was it, I continued softly. But I was wrong. Nathan finally found his voice. We didn't mean for it to happen this way. I stared at him. You didn't mean for me to find out, you mean? He had the decency to look ashamed. Amber tried to recover her bravado. Lauren, you're making this uglier than it needs to be. No, I said. That's not true. You did that. You chose this moment, this place, my birthday, to announce your little surprise. I glanced at my mother, who looked ready to faint. You always said I was the steady one, the dependable one. Maybe you should have wondered why I had to be. I turned back to Nathan. There's something you should know before you start making plans. His brow furrowed. What? I reached into my purse and pulled out a folded document. My hands shook slightly as I set it on the table. Nathan had a vasectomy 2 years ago, I said evenly. Which means, whatever this is, it's not his. Amber stared at me as though I'd struck her. You're lying. Nathan's face went slack. Lauren, you remember, don't you? I said. Recovering on the couch while I brought you frozen peas? He didn't answer, but he didn't deny it. Amber's mouth opened, then closed again. For once, she was speechless. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling the last of the tension I'd been carrying. So, congratulations, Amber, but don't expect me to pretend any longer. I picked up my fork and took a bite of my dinner. It tasted like ash, but I chewed it anyway, because I'd survived worse than this, and I wasn't going to let them watch me fall apart. Amber's face had gone from smug triumph to sickly disbelief in the space of a single heartbeat. She looked around the table as if expecting someone, anyone, to contradict me, to declare this was all some cruel joke. No one did. Nathan rubbed a hand over his mouth. He looked as though he might be sick. My mother had gone pale. My father's expression was unreadable, but he kept his gaze fixed on his napkin, as if hoping this would all vanish if he just refused to look. I watched them all for a long moment, then carefully unfolded the document I'd brought. The official letterhead from Dr. Schaefer's clinic at St. David's gleamed under the restaurant's soft lighting. This is Nathan's medical report, I said quietly. Vasectomy completed in April of 2021. I have copies at home, and my attorney has copies too. Amber finally found her voice, though it sounded thinner than before. You're lying, she said again, but her voice trembled. He told me. He never said, that's because he didn't tell you, I interrupted calmly. Just like he didn't tell you he still slept beside me every night while you were sneaking around. Or that he promised me he'd never wanted children. Nathan closed his eyes. Lauren, please. Don't, I said. You've already said enough. Amber pressed her hand harder against her stomach. There has to be a mistake. I almost pitied her in that moment. Almost. But not quite. The only mistake, I said evenly, was believing you could blow up my life without consequences. My father finally looked up. Lauren, maybe this isn't the place. Oh, I think it's exactly the place, I replied. Amber wanted an audience, didn't she? She wanted to be the star of my birthday dinner. I turned my gaze to her. Well, congratulations. You got your moment. The waiter approached, hesitating at the edge of the table. He looked like he would rather be anywhere else in the world. Is everything all right with the meals? He asked, his voice small. I gave him what I hoped was a reassuring smile. Everything's fine, Thank you. He nodded and scurried away, nearly tripping over a busboy in his haste to escape the unfolding drama. Amber sank back into her chair. The color had drained from her face. I don't understand, she whispered, staring at Nathan. We were so careful. Nathan finally looked at her, and something in his expression shifted. Some wall crumbling that I hadn't even known he was holding up. I never wanted this, he said hoarsely. Any of it. Amber's mouth opened, but no sound came out. You said you loved me, she managed after a moment. I don't know what I feel anymore, Nathan admitted. A bitter laugh bubbled up in my throat. You don't know what you feel? You had months to figure it out. My mother finally broke her silence. Amber? If Nathan had a vasectomy, then who is the father? Amber looked down at her plate, her fingers twisting the napkin in her lap. I don't know, she whispered. The table fell into stunned silence. For a moment, no one moved. No one breathed. Even the restaurant's usual background noise seemed to recede. You don't know? My father echoed, his voice low and incredulous. Amber shook her head, tears slipping down her cheeks. There was someone else, she said, her voice cracking. Before Nathan. But it was over. My mother covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes filling with tears. Oh, Amber. Nathan pushed back from the table, the legs of his chair screeching against the floor. He stood, rubbing a hand over his jaw, looking anywhere but at Amber. I felt something inside me go still, like a clock whose hands had finally stopped moving. This was it. The final, undeniable truth. There would be no salvaging anything from this wreckage. I took a slow sip of my water, willing my hands not to shake. So, just to be clear, I said, my voice steady, you don't actually know who the father of your baby is. Amber didn't look up. No, she whispered. Nathan closed his eyes. Jesus. The absurdity of it all struck me then. The months of secrecy, the elaborate lies, the smug glances, and it had all unraveled in under 10 minutes. Lauren, Nathan said, turning to me, can we please go somewhere private and talk? I tilted my head, studying him as if he were a stranger, which, in many ways, he was. There's nothing left to say, I replied. I'll have my attorney contact you. His shoulders slumped. It doesn't have to be like this. It already is, I said quietly. Amber finally lifted her tear-streaked face. I didn't mean for this to happen. I met her gaze without flinching. You never do. For a moment we stared at each other, two sisters with nothing left between us but the wreckage of every bad decision she'd ever made. The waiter reappeared, hovering nervously. Would you like dessert menus? I almost laughed at the surreal politeness of the question. No, I said, just the check. As he hurried away, Amber whispered, Lauren, please, you're my sister. I felt something loosen in my chest, some ancient ache I'd been carrying since childhood. That's exactly the problem, I said. The waiter returned with the bill. I signed it without hesitation. As I set the pen down, Nathan spoke one last time. Where are you going? I looked up at him, feeling nothing but clarity. Home, but not with you. I stood, smoothing my dress over my hips. My mother reached for my hand, but I pulled away gently. I'll be in touch, I told them. But right now, I'm done with this. Nathan opened his mouth, but no words came out. Amber sat motionless, her hands cradling her belly as though it were the last thing she could cling to. I turned and walked away from the table. I didn't look back. Outside, the night air was cool against my flushed skin. I took a long breath, then another. For the first time in years, the world felt wide open. I didn't know exactly where I was going, but I knew it would be somewhere they couldn't follow. I didn't go back to the house that night. Instead, I checked into a small hotel downtown, a place I'd stayed once for a work conference. The clerk didn't ask why I was there alone with a single overnight bag and red-rimmed eyes. She just slid the key across the counter with a sympathetic nod. In the quiet of the room, I sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing my birthday dress. My phone vibrated over and over. Calls from Nathan, texts from my mother, voicemails I didn't bother to listen to. Eventually, I powered it off, set it face down on the nightstand, and let the silence settle around me like a blanket. It would have been easier to fall apart, to cry until there was nothing left in me, but I didn't. I felt empty. Yes, exhausted. But underneath the numbness was something almost like relief. This was over. There would be no more guessing. No more pretending I didn't see what was happening right in front of me. The facade was gone, and what remained was something I could finally walk away from. The next morning, I called the only person I trusted unconditionally, my oldest friend, Elise. She didn't ask questions. She just listened. When I finally fell silent, she exhaled softly and said, "Come stay with me." Elise had a guest room and a kind of unshakable steadiness I'd always admired. That afternoon, I loaded what I could into my car: a few clothes, my work laptop, the folder with all the evidence I'd collected. I left everything else behind. Nathan must have come home to find the closet half empty, my wedding ring in a small glass dish by the sink. I never asked what he thought when he saw it. I didn't care. While I settled into Elise's house, I called my attorney, Patricia Kramer. She had a reputation for being calm, thorough, and absolutely ruthless when necessary. "I'm ready," I told her when she picked up. There was a small pause, as if she were giving me space to reconsider. But I didn't waver. "Let's start the process," I said. Patricia's voice was gentle but firm. "Then let's begin." The following days blurred into a series of methodical steps: filing the petition, freezing joint accounts, gathering all our financial statements and property records. While Patricia handled the legal side, I focused on reclaiming any piece of my life that still belonged to me. Nathan called me dozens of times. The first messages were apologetic, tearful. "Please, Lauren, we need to talk." When I didn't respond, he grew angrier. "You can't just disappear," he said in one voicemail. "You owe me a conversation." I owed him nothing. Amber texted me once. "Amber, I'm sorry. Please don't shut me out." I read it, then deleted it without replying. At work, I told my manager I needed a few days. She didn't press for details, just said, "Take whatever time you need." When I came back the next week, I buried myself in client pitches and marketing plans. Every hour I spent working felt like a tiny reclaiming of my dignity. My focus became a shield. If I kept moving, I couldn't sink. 2 weeks later, I returned to the house to pack the rest of my things. Nathan wasn't there. Patricia had arranged for him to be elsewhere. Elise came with me for support. Together, we walked through each room, sorting what was mine from what I no longer wanted. I left behind the wedding china and the art we'd chosen together. I didn't want reminders. I took the things that mattered: the quilt my grandmother made, the books I'd collected since college, the framed photo of my college graduation where I'd stood beaming, unaware of how complicated life would get. On my way out, I placed a note on the kitchen counter. "You'll hear from Patricia. Please respect my decision to end this with dignity. Lauren." When I closed the door behind me, I felt a weight lift I hadn't realized I was still carrying. That night, Nathan sent one last text. "Nathan, I can't believe you're just walking away like this." I read it twice. Then I powered off my phone again. Yes, I was walking away, and for the first time, I didn't feel guilty about it. In the weeks that followed, my parents tried to convince me to reconsider. My mother called daily, leaving increasingly frantic messages. "Mom, she's your sister. You can't cut her out over a mistake." "Mom, Nathan is sorry. He said he was confused. Mom, families can heal from this. My father was quieter, but when I finally answered one of his calls, he said simply, "I'm sorry we didn't see it coming." "I did," I replied. "I just didn't want to believe it." After that, he didn't call again. At least, not right away. Amber sent me a letter, handwritten in her perfect looping script. She said she was ashamed, that she'd never meant to hurt me, that she was scared and alone and didn't know what to do. I read it exactly once before folding it back into the envelope. I wasn't ready to decide if forgiveness would ever be possible. Some betrayals cut too deep to mend quickly, if they can be mended at all. By the end of that first month, the divorce was underway, and I had signed a lease on a new apartment in South Austin. It was nothing fancy. A modest one-bedroom in a brick building with creaky floors and a tiny balcony. But it was mine. Moving day was strange. As I carried boxes up the stairs, I felt the enormity of what I'd left behind. Not just a marriage, but an entire history of being the dependable sister. The one who smoothed things over, who never said no, who swallowed every slight and betrayal. No more. I unpacked my dishes and books, hung a few prints on the walls, and let the silence of the empty space wrap around me like a promise. This was where it would start over. Just me. The first night in my new apartment, I sat cross-legged on the floor with a glass of cheap grocery store wine, listening to the hum of the city outside my window. It was the strangest feeling. The grief was still there, heavy and hollow, but there was something else too, relief. A freedom so sharp it almost felt like joy. I was alone. But I was no longer shackled to people who mistook my kindness for weakness. That week, I returned to work with a single goal: to rebuild the parts of myself I'd let erode for too long. My focus became laser sharp. I picked up extra projects, volunteered to lead a new client campaign, and arrived early every morning with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. When people asked if I was okay, I nodded. I was more than okay. I was finally awake. Nathan continued to hover at the edges of my life like a persistent ghost. At first, he tried contrition. "Nathan, I'm sorry. Nathan, we need to talk. Nathan, I still love you." Then came the indignation. "Nathan, you can't just erase everything we had. Nathan, you're being cruel." But the messages lost their power the day I realized I didn't care what he thought anymore. I'd spent years caring, years compromising, explaining, hoping he'd see my worth. I was done. Amber, too, seemed to finally grasp the magnitude of what she'd done. After the letter she sent, she respected my silence, at least for a while. My mother, however, was relentless. One evening, she called while I was folding laundry in my small bedroom. "Lauren," she began, her voice tight with frustration, "this has gone on long enough. Amber is your sister. She's pregnant and alone. Surely you can find some compassion." I closed my eyes, pressing the phone tighter to my ear. "Mom, I have compassion, but it doesn't mean I owe her my peace. She's family," she insisted. "So am I said quietly, "but you've never protected me from her." There was a long pause on the line. For once, my mother had no reply. After that, she called less often. My father, on the other hand, surprised me. He came to see me one Saturday morning, standing awkwardly in the hallway with a paper bag of pastries. "I'm not here to change your mind," he said. "I just wanted to see you." We sat on my balcony, drinking coffee and listening to the breeze stir the trees. "I failed you," he said eventually. "I thought Amber needed more of our attention. I thought you were stronger. But strong doesn't mean unbreakable." I didn't answer, but something loosened between us that day. A quiet truce. An unspoken acknowledgement of all the things we hadn't said. 3 months later, my divorce was finalized. Patricia called me on a Tuesday morning to tell me it was official. Nathan had accepted the settlement terms rather than prolong the inevitable. "You did everything right," Patricia told me. For the first time in months, I believed her. I left work early that day. When I got home, I poured a glass of wine and stood in my living room, taking in the small, imperfect space I'd built on my own. It was nothing like the polished house I'd shared with Nathan, but it felt real, honest, mine. Amber reached out again after the papers were signed. She called late one evening, her number lighting up my phone in the dark. Against my better judgment, I answered. Her voice was small. "Lauren, I'm here," I said, though my tone was cautious. "I had the baby," she said. "A boy." My stomach clenched. "Congratulations." "They did a paternity test," she continued, her voice cracking. "It's not Nathan's." I closed my eyes. I had suspected as much, but hearing it made the last shreds of her story crumble. "His name is Eli," she whispered. "I know you probably don't care, but I thought you should know." I didn't reply immediately. So many emotions collided inside me. Old love, new grief, exhausted disbelief. "I hope you'll be a better mother than you were a sister," I said finally. My voice was soft, but steady. She started to cry. "I'm so sorry, Lauren. For everything, I don't expect you to forgive me, but I had to say it." I said nothing. There was nothing left to say. After a moment, I ended the call. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I simply set the phone down and exhaled. Because this was the truth I had finally embraced. Forgiveness is a gift you give when you're ready, not an obligation you owe to the people who hurt you. In the months that followed, I stopped waiting to feel like my old self again, because the old me, the version who swallowed disappointment, who smoothed over every wound, was gone. And I didn't want her back. I wanted someone stronger, someone honest, someone who knew she deserved more than scraps of love and loyalty. Slowly, I began to rebuild. I painted my apartment walls a warm, rich blue Nathan would have hated. I bought a small dining table, secondhand but sturdy, and hosted friends for simple dinners where no one was performing or pretending. At work, I earned a promotion, stepping into a leadership role I once thought I wasn't ready for. Turns out surviving the implosion of your life teaches you exactly how capable you are, and eventually, carefully, I started to let new people into my world. One evening, after a late meeting, my colleague Marcus walked me to my car. He hesitated, then said, "I know you've been through hell, but you're one of the most remarkable people I've ever met." I didn't know what would come of it, if anything, but I smiled. Because I finally understood that my worth wasn't measured by who chose me or who betrayed me. It was something no one could take. A year after the birthday dinner that had detonated my old life, I spent my birthday differently. I invited friends, just the people who had stood by me through every ugly, beautiful moment, to a small restaurant downtown. No speeches, no staged announcements, just warmth and laughter and a single chocolate cake with my name on it. When the server lit the candle, I closed my eyes and made a wish, not for things to go back to the way they were, but for the courage to keep moving forward. And as I opened my eyes to the faces of people who truly loved me, I knew I was finally free.